You would figure after 168 episodes of the Campus Comics Cast, I would remember to write an intro to the episode more than 30 seconds before we start recording, but once again, no. My name is Scott Reed, and I'm joined on this episode by
Mike Atchison
and Chad Schubert.
And in this episode, we are going to be discussing Volume 1 of Black, then the first 5 Spider-Man, and finally we're going to wrap things up with a CLZ shake. Before we jump into Black, does anybody got any news or hot takes or anything they want to talk about? I didn't even look at the news before we started recording today.
I don't think I've got anything that I've seen that's really. We're still in, as far as the movie TV side of things, we're still in writers' strike and actors' strike, and
I saw rumors about She-Hulk season 2, and it's like, why are we talking about She-Hulk season 2 when there's no progress going to be made on that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's definitely not a lot of news on that on the screen side of things for sure.
No, definitely not. So, and I'm trying to think of anything comic book wise announcements jumped out at me, but nothing substantial, just regular stuff. Nobody's going bankrupt yet, or
right.
Kind of everybody's still in the same boat anyway. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we're just going to start in with Volume 1 of Black. I'm going to read the synopsis from the back of the trade. In a world that already hates and fears them, what if only black people had superpowers? After being gunned down by police, Kareem Jenkins miraculously survives and learns that he is part of the biggest lie in history. Only black people have superpowers. Now he must decide whether it's safer to keep it a secret or if the truth will set him free. Collecting the Kickstarter crushing and critically acclaimed series Black, issues number 1 through 6, written by Kwanza Osajyefo and illustrated by Jamal Igle. There you go. That's the synopsis from the back.
I'm impressed with the pronunciation.
Well, I'm sure I butchered the writer's last name, but I'm just gonna you say something with authority and people might believe it unless they know better. So
it was phonetically close.
There we go. Yeah, as close as I could get. And then the other creator on this is somebody named Tim Smith III. All right, and he's not listed here on the back since it's not the writer or the illustrator. And by them having Jamal Igle as illustrator, I assume that means he did pencils and inks because it is a black and white book in more ways.
Yeah, it has. Tim Smith III is listed as creator/designer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you have the trade, some of the design work in the very, very back, I think some of the character designs were probably his.
Oh, okay.
Is what I'm guessing by designer. And then, of course, they also have some of the plot points in the back. Also, okay, let's see.
Whose pick was this? If we could.
Okay, so this was my pick once again at Superman Celebration this year. Jamal Igle was there, and I had after my embarrassing conversation about me not having kickstarted Molly Danger whenever I thought that I had. I wanted to actually talk about this, but I talked to him about this book. It's like, hey, is this something that I could get something out of? There's this, I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was, I think the name of the movie was Barbershop, and it was about a black barbershop, and there was literally conversation, amongst people that this movie, like a white person shouldn't go, or actually black people were upset that this movie was made because it kind of told some secrets about the black community, right? And so I literally asked them the question is this book kind of like what Barbershop was, and that should I read this book? Should I not read this book? And he said, no, absolutely, you should read this book. So it's like, okay, I'm going to read this book, because I had owned the individual issues at one time, including some of the controversial covers. I actually got them in a collection. And I actually sold them without having read them. So after meeting him, and I thought, well, this would be a good time. So we've had a little Jamal Igle, streak here of books he's worked on, and it's Molly James or something that he created, and now Black something that he was involved in. So
and I'm not afraid to say that bias affects all of us throughout our lives, and I mean this in a positive way, because I'm biased in that I'm going to probably be in favor of not just reviewing something that Jamal Igle has his hands in, but just my review of it's probably going to be tinged with positivity, more so than maybe otherwise, because I think I've met him as you have, and he's just a real gentleman, and I think it's and what you said there, you said he told you about, that's a valid question. Having read this now, that you asked, is this something that's really meant for the broader community? And I'm glad to hear that, because I was thinking the same thing, because it's like a lot of the dialogue is not something you would, it's not something that anybody other than someone of African descent that would say some of the things. And so I'm really glad that we reviewed this one.
Now, that being said, I'll just go ahead and give up my quick hot take. I was really disappointed in it. I'm just gonna tell you up front, I was super disappointed in this book, and I'll explain why as we get further into things. But I don't know, any first thoughts before I do? I got a real quick synopsis, and then you can expand on my synopsis with certain points that I'm sure that I'm omitting, because it is a really fairly brief synopsis of a 6-issue series. So
yeah. My only intro thoughts before we even got to the issue by issue is just that the writer, Kwanza Osajyefo, if that's close as I could get to what you said, he started as an intern at Marvel Comics. I was doing some research, and this is one of those books you're not going to find a lot online about. It was, produced through,
Black Mask, but it was a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It was a Kickstarter,
right? Yeah, that's what was the word I was looking for. But so it's not like it has its own wiki, No. So you had to dig a little bit deeper. So I thought that was interesting. And even though we'll get to it. The black and white artwork, I don't know what I think about that yet, but we can go into the synopsis if you want.
Well, let's just do the synopsis, then we can just cut loose on it and go from there. So
cool.
And I only actually read this once. I normally try to read books at least twice before we review them, and I only actually made it through it once. So hopefully I have names correct, but please let me know if I have something incorrect so we can get that corrected. So, all right. So Kareem and two friends are gunned down by white police officers in Chicago. Kareem miraculously comes back to life while escaping the police encounters. Jeremiah, the head of a group called the Project, he meets Jeremiah, who's the head of a group called the Project, who are gathering blacks with powers. After being trained by Kareem, aka X, he comes to believe that the Project is actually a prison for blacks with powers and joins in a breakout attempt. During this time, Theodore Mann, a white man, and is literally the man, is trying to unlock the reasons for blacks having powers, but not whites. After a lot of fisticuffs between black heroes with powers and black villains with powers, and white villain Theodore Mann with his crew and his technology, Kareem comes to an understanding and agreement with the Project and ultimately becomes a hero. So, I mean, that's a really, really brief synopsis, but I think it hits the high points of the story, because I really feel like a lot of those issues were just kind of like this extended fight sequences between just like the groups inside the Project, and it was just kind of went on for a little while. So Shad, initial thoughts?
I did struggle with the overall just a black and white book, as it already, for me, when it comes to a comic, without having any colorist attached to it, sets it back for me immediately, where I'm like, okay, it better be extra good, because I don't have a colorist to kind of bring me in and draw me in the ways that a colorist does in that. So it started off in that, like, okay, I love the dialect that was used. I thought that, I mean, very mature, but very real. It felt like I was actually, listening to a conversation. There were a couple of issues where the action was just like on point. Like the beats were good. It flowed so well. I think issue 2 really stood out for me when it came to the action and going like, dang, they really pulled off a lot of movement. And I never got lost for one bit, especially with it being in black and white. There's no like distinctive, oh, there's the blue shirt guy, there's the pink shirt guy, like kind of thing. I felt like I was able to hold on to all of that really well in that. Very powerful stuff, throughout it. There were a lot of it's set very much in the reality of things. I feel. I mean, this one definitely has a superhero kind of mask around the reality of race in the United States specifically. But I thought it was very well done. Not a book I would normally have picked up, I don't think, but well done.
I've got, Mike, before I let you give your first thoughts, I've got one thing that I want to say. Didn't want to give either of you a chance to steal it. So this first issue is like literally the Matrix.
Absolutely, I've got it in my notes.
Okay, all right. I just don't want anybody to steal that point from me. So I mean, you have Kareem is Neo. You have Jeremiah / Juncture, I think was his hero name.
Yes,
Yeah.
Basically takes on the role of Morpheus. There's an Oracle character. I'm sure you could go in and pull out a whole bunch of different points that just felt exactly like the Matrix. But the first issue for sure is like beat with the Matrix. So okay, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, that's I couldn't have stole that from you. It sounds like Chad could have.
Chad did.
Yeah, it says
I lucked out.
My note specifically says it did feel like the Matrix red pill, blue pill decision time.
But since it was in black and white, you didn't have a red pill or a blue pill.
Yeah, you didn't have the colored pills. You're right. Good point. Yeah.
I think it just if we're just giving initial thoughts, I think I didn't have a problem too much with the art being black and white, except I think it would have been better with color because you had so many different powered characters, and I spent some time trying to figure out exactly what they were doing, and it just seemed like the kind of book that benefits from some color. The non-superhero, the non-battle scenes, maybe not so much, but I think there were some transitions from scenes that weren't clear as to what was going on, but I know there was a lot of teleporting too, so maybe just some narration caption boxes would have helped. Overall, I think the writing style relied pretty heavily on dialogue only. You really didn't see caption boxes. So I overall think that Kareem Jenkins is a very likable primary character, and the entire ensemble of, you have the bad, and then you got the good, and then you got the good that are somewhat immoral. And that part, my notes say, reminded me of Kingdom Come. It was like old school heroes and new school heroes. Should have been joining forces to fight off the man.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add to anything that you've said, just as initial thoughts. But I will say, you both commented on it. The black and white artwork didn't bother me at all, because I have seen times where adding color to a story can actually bring down the quality of the artwork. So, and with Jamal Igle, I love his pencil and ink work. So it is, just having it in black and white, I could tell who all the characters were. There wasn't any issue differentiating between, what to me was going on. I really think ultimately this book suffered from not having a strong story. So it sounds like we're maybe going to be disagreeing on that point just a little bit, but I feel like the weakness in this is just from the storytelling perspective. So I'll throw out some points. First thing is, I think there were way too many characters introduced in this story. There are just too many. Most of them did not get any depth, to the character. I really wanted to see a whole lot more of Detective Waters, and you feel like as you start this story that she's the first real character that you're introduced to, and I felt like she was kind of forgotten for a good portion of the story. So it would have been nice to have the non-powered the non-powered black person seeing this world develop through her eyes, and she could have kind of been the placeholder for us as the reader.
The reader, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, to kind of see what was going on, and she wasn't consistent throughout the book. So
Yeah, that's a good point. And I had the same problem with keeping track of all the characters, so much so that I wrote down my own cheat sheet. So I knew some of them they weren't really clear about the names. So let's see how much you guys tell me if I'm right or wrong in your mind. So Bass is the one with the vocal powers, right?
I only read this once.
Okay.
So
Swerve had some sort of light manipulation where it looked like a whip. Zero had super cold powers. He was the albino. Cole was the guy that had fire powers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who gets cut in half at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I got a big kick out of the super strong guy named Swole. He was swole up. He could turn himself from being skinny to swole. Mm-hmm. Mind Grapes was like a chimpanzee, but he had like mental powers.
He was kind of like a Gorilla Grodd, right? In a way.
Yeah. Less gorilla and more chimpanzee. It seemed like the body style.
Okay, I'm gonna comment on this character.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely something that a white writer could not have done.
Absolutely not.
It's turned a black character, powered character into a chimpanzee.
Right.
I mean, it's just like, and then again, there's times where I'm reading this and it's just like,
that's what I was getting at earlier. I was cringing at even saying the words in my mind.
Yeah.
Because, and it's fair or unfair to other races, but it's uncomfortable because you're not ever going to say, those things. Yeah. And, but that's why I was glad you said you had that conversation with Jamal about, can I be part of the target audience, or is it not really supposed to be really either way? And then there was I got a big kick out of this woman who I don't think she was ever named, but she had the big hair like Lady Godiva, and she could use her hair to grab things.
Kind of like Medusa from Marvel.
Or Medusa. Yeah. So and Hood Rat, and there were some other ones unnamed, but I thought, okay, this is a series that would have been, if it went, further than 6 issues, there would have been character development, and people would have went back and said, yeah, that was the first appearance of Hood Rat. And, even though they weren't really named.
Now, it does go more than 6 issues.
Oh, okay. It did it had a sequel volume, Black AF.
No, I thought it was White. So I think there's a second volume called White.
And there is Black AF, America's Sweetheart, and there's Black AF, Widows and Orphans are two. Okay. They're like standalone, like one's 112 pages, the other one's 80 pages.
Okay, those are advertised at the back, right? I think there's also a volume called White. I probably should have looked this up. While you guys keep talking, let's see if I can go find that.
But my point was there is benefit to see if the story progresses and allows for some character development, because I love the team gathering part of a story. I like seeing that there was lots of different characters, except it felt like it was confined to one story, and I would never know anything more about them, much less or even know what their names were. So, there
is a second volume. It's Black Volume
White.
2, White. Right.
Okay.
So. Yep, it's out there. So they do continue. So
as far as go ahead, Chad. I haven't.
You're fine. I don't have a lot more on top of it. Like I said before, there was a lot of social commentary to where I was like, when did this come out? And it was 2017. So that kind of helped me go, okay. I think just a couple other notes I had. The covers were super powerful. Those were. Those were some covers. I was like, holy cow! Every single one of them.
Carrie Randolph is the cover artist.
Okay.
And those covers are more representative of the story that I was expecting and wanting to get out of this book from what I actually got.
Gotcha. Yeah, those definitely grabbed me. Let's see. Looking through just a couple other things. I thought, as a what if concept goes, this was a very good something that it was not overly comic book hero-y. I think anybody off the street, anybody could read this and could go, I see what's going on. I see what we're doing here. You're not lost in anything. It's grounded, but it also has enough of the fantasy. And yeah, so overall, I those are kind of my notes I had for that.
Yeah, that covered, like the covered issue 1. That's where you have, the black individual in a hood surrounded by the cops, and really it's black, white, and then they added red to basically all of these covers. Issue number 2, where you have the lynching, right? That's, I mean, issue number 3, was that the Donkey Kong one? Issue number 3?
Issue 3 is
the
lineup, yeah.
Now there's a alternative version of that cover where, and I think it's this cover where they choose some different words for the signs that they're holding. Issue 4 must have been the Donkey Kong cover.
Yes, issue 4 is the Donkey Kong.
Yeah, so you have the KKK and basically what I guess supposed to be a Supreme Court judge and obviously Trump up at the top in this Donkey Kong.
Yes.
5. We got the flag, which is also jail bars for a black man in prison. And since I went through 5, I got to go through all 6 of them. So, and then you have just the fist raised, is what I'll describe that final. But man, those covers, they elicit some very strong emotions. And I did not get that same feeling from the story that I got from the covers.
I gotcha. So, I did in parts. Like there were definitely issues where you got that. Like issue 1 felt like there were some powerful parts to it. Issue 5 felt like there were powerful parts to it. Like when they're going through and talking about why it's so detrimental for, they're kind of in a bad position either way. If the world finds out that black people have superpowers, they fear them, but they also hunt them down. And that it becomes all black people and not just the people with superpowers, and everybody's potentially a victim in that. And those kind of things were like, holy crap, this is powerful stuff, because you can relate. It's a great analogy to the real world that we live in, unfortunately. But so yeah, there's some really powerful points in it. But I do agree it's not, and maybe it's better that it's not heavy-handed through every single issue of all 6 issues, and that it is in moments where you think about it and you go, holy cow, but it's not just going. Maybe that's a good choice. Maybe that's a choice that Kwanza made in this that made it maybe a better story. And if we got the story where it was powerful movement after powerful movement after powerful movement, it would have felt too heavy and not enough in superhero land.
Yeah, I don't know. Whenever you have what it's probably going to be a limited story, a limited run story, I think you can have the power and not try to spread it out. Because here they even introduced this concept of the, they talked about the quarks, right, as how they get their powers, and then Kareem has this, was it a 6-dimensional cord or something different about this cord, which is like, and then okay, that's why everybody's out to get him, but
metachlorians.
Yeah, there you go. But was that really essential to the story?
No, probably not. Yeah.
Well, they had to give some reason for the powers to be, concentrated in people.
But you didn't need 2 levels of quarks to do that.
Oh yeah, it was like, well, hell, they could say whatever they want science-wise. I mean, it's basically dabbled in quantum mechanics, and I think they needed that for at least Kareem, or as he came to be known later, X. They needed to establish the fact that it's not just quarks, but quantum mechanics establish, or the theory is that there are multiple it's simultaneously multiple possibilities that are occurring at I was almost said simultaneously at the same time, which would be a little bit you know what I mean. It's like, so that kind of was reflected in his powers, that he could react to certain stressors with a power that would put him, allow him to defeat that situation. So maybe they just doubled down on that for his sake, but they didn't need it for the rest of them.
There was I guess that was the thing that made him special compared to the other
Right.
black powered individuals. That he, even though there's all these other black powered individuals, there's something different about where the origin of his powers that sets him apart, and I guess is what made him the target for all three of these groups. But you know, I still I don't know. It just was kind of just like that, you know, MacGuffin type thing, you know.
Yeah.
Throw it out there and whatever.
I got a kick out of the son, the one who went by O, and he was Juncture's son. But whenever we first meet him, he's an inmate in this detention area or this prison for the superpowered black people, and he becomes Kareem's cellmate, and he's talking straight. I mean, his vernacular is nothing like what it turns out to be, which was all pretty cool because it was all put on. But whenever he asked what Kareem's superhero or whatever name was, Kareem came up with X, and he goes, "Oh, so creativity is not one of your powers." So I thought I got a big kick out of that.
Yeah.
Probably my biggest complaint about this whole thing is I just thought the dialogue through the majority of these issues was just bad. There are times when it's like I really felt like it was like a white guy trying to write black dialogue, and it was either just bad or just like deliberately a blaxploitation type movie writing. I don't know, it has to be. I feel like they have to be going for the blaxploitation movie style writing, but it just was so over the top that it was to the point of absurd to me.
Huh. I thought it was very grounded. That was my note on it. I thought it was very grounded, realistic.
I'm in between. I think that's what led to my discomfort, but I should be uncomfortable. I'm a white guy, you know. But it was like Kwanza was. I thought he did a good job in differentiating different dialects within the black community. He Absolutely. Had the Creole sound of coal, or maybe he was just kind of like country. And then there was I don't know if it was Jamaican or Creole, I can't remember, but it was the guy that he could like turn on animal powers, lion, and he just slashed his way through things.
There's definitely an islander of some sort dialect in there, and then I was like, oh,
it was Caribbean at least.
Up on that. Yeah, it was. I thought, man, that's you gotta be good at writing that kind of broken, that way of writing with apostrophes and you know everything to be able for me to be able to read it and go, oh, I know exactly generally what this sounds like, and I'm like, dang, that was
it's like when Morrison writes in a Scottish accent. I can hear exactly when Sam Scudder or whatever the second Miracle or Mirror Master sounded like. He was a Scottish guy, and it was like, yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was good, but again, I kind of also agree that, man, but who knows? I think you're gonna, in one capacity or another, you're gonna run into folks that talk that way. I just don't like a ton of dialogue driving the story. That was my big beef. That it's all dialogue driven. Not that he didn't succeed. I don't agree that it was a poor story. I just think once it hit issue 5 and 6, I was all in. I felt like it really 3 and 4. Things were dragging. And I think part of that was because the detective was not really involved, and I thought she was going to be the main point of view character. And then once 5 hit, it was like, oh, okay, now it's all kind of making sense, and I enjoyed it all the way through after that.
Final thoughts, Shad?
I got all my thoughts out.
You got your thoughts out, Mike? You got any last thoughts?
Oh. I had a quick note here about that. It was very disturbing to see the room where the black people with powers were being experimented on, and that little girl that wasn't even powered, and that was very that evoked a lot of emotion and just sickened you. I mean,
here's okay, I have my sarcasm quotes up. Sarcasm, that would never happen in America. In my sarcasm, right? Because
right.
we know about the Tuskegee experiments
Yes,
and all that type of stuff. So that I'm want to make it very clear. I'm being sarcastic.
That's true. I liked how Kareem summed it up in the final scene. Juncture, that was the dad, wanted emancipation, and his son O wanted retaliation. Kareem, or now known as X, wanted to give representation. And I thought that was a good encapsulation of the motivations of all three of the more major characters. And my last thought is even though it's not a super sophisticated and not super deep, it's not like, but I think it's made for TV or a movie. I think this would be, I could see this being a very successful show somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, I'll go first on the grade because I know I'm going to be the low man on this based on our discussion. So that way it goes up and we go positive here. So, and I don't know, maybe I'm going to have to read this again because like I said, I only read it once. So I'm giving a very good 4.0. I really, really wanted to like this series. And and a lot of my initial opinions on this series were based on those covers that I had seen. And I did not feel like I got that depth. So I was pretty disappointed in the storytelling. What I got, I was expecting a lot stronger commentary on society. And I just did not feel like it was present in this book.
What'd you say, 4.5?
4.0. VG 4.0. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm gonna see your 4.0, and I'm gonna have to go a little higher just to counterbalance it. So our average score is a little higher. No, I'm kidding. I'm happy to give this a if it were just grading on the last two issues or maybe the first and the fifth and sixth issues, I'd probably give it an 8 or an 8.5. But I'm gonna probably give it a 7. Fine / very fine. It's above average. I thought it would have been better if it was color, in my opinion. Even though Jamal Igle has fantastic pencil work, but yeah, 7.0.
And I had it at a 7.5, and I gave it an extra bump for just the message of it. So it got a half point on that. So I gave it an 8.0. Very fine.
You know what? Now it ticks me off. I should have went last. I probably would have gone a little higher. Why did we do that?
I don't know. That's why I knew I was going to be low based on our discussion. So I thought we want to be more positive about it going out. But and I probably need to read it again. I'll just be honest. I probably need to read it again. And maybe with some of my initial expectations. It's just like when you see a movie and your expectations are too high and then you are disappointed. Well, then when you go in with realistic expectations, maybe then some of the story points can come out a little bit clearer to me because I'm not looking for that, really shocking in my face type of storytelling. So.
Well, and you were right about those covers. I mean, those covers, it could be in a gallery. I mean, I would not be surprised to go to an art gallery showing and see those as pieces on a wall. Absolutely not. Yeah. That makes all the sense.
I just wonder if that's I was looking to see if the writer had done anything else and outside of this universe I didn't see anything, but I hadn't yet got around to searching for the cover artist to see if the cover artist, what did I say, it was Karis. Oh, I lost it. Yeah, Carrie Randolph. I'm going to do a quick search here for Carrie Randolph and see if we've got anything Carrie Randolph has done as well. American comic book artist, according to Wikipedia. Let's see. Trying to find some other work. Oh, amazing. No, okay, must be. Okay, this must be a different. They have Amazing Fantasy 15, but
must have been
but
that's 2016.
It's a different a 2006 version, but it takes you to the series, not so they did a book with Robert Kirkman. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to research that. We Are Robin series.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there was, I mean, now I see that because I think the covers had a very, very similar theme
Ah.
for that We Are Robin. So that, yeah.
Yeah, I think I probably will end up diving into more of this world, with the white, the second volume,
Hmm.
and it looks like there is actually three AF books. There's the two
Yeah.
that we talked about, and then there's one called Devil's Die that came out in 2019.
Yeah. And before I got to that last page of this volume, I knew about
White.
Black White.
Huh?
I did not know about Black AF. I was completely unaware of that before those final pages. I thought, oh, well, they probably just promoted that and never released it. And well, sure enough, they're out there. So,
Yeah, and it looks like White is the last thing that's come out. The
mhm.
the three spin-offs came out in between the two volumes, and 21 is when White came out.
That's the downside to the way Kickstarter and self-publishing or whatever small press works. It's just it's hard to really figure out how to pick it all up.
Yeah. Well, and it's like when there's a creator that you really like, well, the argument is, well, you should follow that creator. But then you get everything else, and then you
Yeah.
still can miss it through some of the noise. So
Mhm.
it's just, yeah, it's a pain.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I used to
unless you're just
complain
like
about it.
constantly Googling their name, like you
Mhm.
you can't.
This is something I probably would have supported through Kickstarter if I'd have known about it, but that was in 2016 or so. I probably really wasn't involved in these kinds of things then. But to kind of go back to what your last statement was, Shad, the message really does make up for some
Hmm.
little small deficiencies in my mind. But like I said, I think it would really hit well on the bigger small screen.
I agree.
All right. Well, we ready to move on?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. So,
Mm-mm-mm.
all right. So this is our second installment of First Five. And of course, we did Wonder Woman previously, and now we are switching gears to Marvel, and we are going with the Amazing Spider-Man. So, first five appearances are Amazing Fantasy 15, and then Amazing Spider-Man issues 1 through 4. This was pretty easy to track down these.
Yeah.
What the first five appearances were. Now, I'm sure each of you pulled your copies out of your personal collection and
Yep.
read through those, right? So,
Put the white gloves on.
but the light goes
That's
on,
right.
yeah. Now, I actually have owned, I don't now though, have in the past owned 2 copies of Amazing Spider-Man #1. I've
Have
never
you?
had an Amazing Fantasy 15, but at one time I actually had 2 copies. They were beat to heck, but I did have 2 copies of Amazing #1 at one time. So,
Wow.
and I've had a 4. I've not had 2 or 3, but I've had 1 and 4 of Amazing
Oh,
Spider-Man.
4. That's the
So
one with Sandman. That's
that's
a
the
good
Sandman
cover.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also owned that twice as well. So
Hmm.
once pretty nice and once super rough. So
With these being printed in the 60s and not the 40s, you think there would be more of them around, but I don't know. I mean, it's not that hard to find contemporary books that weren't, you look for a Superman from the early 60s, it's not that hard to find.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, who knows why? It's kind of hard to say why they're not around a little bit more, but I think it's just because nobody viewed them as collectible, so or
Mhm.
few people viewed them as collectibles. So all right, so Mike, what are your initial thoughts on this version of Spider-Man? How does this version stack up to what you see now?
It stacks up and piles on everything I see now with Spider-Man. I think the original is the best. I mean, to be fair, I've read Amazing Fantasy 15 before, but not the first 4 issues of Amazing Spider-Man. Um, I I can see, being a DC guy primarily, I can see why there were so many Marvel readers in the early 60s. It was for a good reason. It was not stuffy. It was maybe it's of its age with
Mm-hmm.
the dialogue, but still It's snappy. It's not like Snapper Carr in the Justice League. It would sounded like a 50-year-old guy trying to talk like a teenager. Stan Lee had it down,
No, he had his moments too, but okay.
Well, yeah. But I enjoyed these so much, and especially reading them all in order, all at one time. So my initial thoughts are that this is why I think if you were to pick moments in comic history, why these characters have lasted the ages, this is it. This is the kind of stuff that did it. So, I mean, there's other stuff too, but when it comes to superhero comics and people wearing their pajamas, out in the street, not many people would really normally do that unless they were, were pretending to be Spider-Man.
Shad, what are your initial thoughts?
Everything, and similar to Wonder Woman, it's like everything's there. It's not much has changed. I mean, like Mike said, it's build onto over and over again. But I mean, just going, yeah, these are all the beats that, I mean, I also haven't read a lot of modern Spider-Man, but to go, yeah, that's the movies. Like, I mean, even if nothing else, that the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies and these issues, is like, it's the same villains, it's the same exact story beats, it's like, it's tried and true. Nothing has really changed about it. And I was sure there was going to be something that was off or different about it, but really no. I mean, to knock the Rogues Gallery out of the park as well as they did there, for them, not only the hero and his origin story, but the Rogues Gallery, the villains to be the same, was like, oh wow, we had Vulture, we had Sandman, we had these like right out the gate, Doc Ock, and that was what I think was the most surprising for me.
Yeah, short of, Batman, Spider-Man probably has the most impressive Rogues Gallery, or the most well-known Rogues Gallery of any superhero out there. So, and you could even argue who's better, Batman or Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. Right. So, I know what Mike would vote for, but
I don't know. I think you've had, I don't know. It's almost impossible to really have an objective one-on-one comparison with Rogues Galleries. I think the Batman has a deep bench, but not as many or as recognizable as Spider-Man's.
I don't know. I mean, everybody knows who the Joker is. Everybody knows who the Riddler is. Everybody knows who Catwoman is. Everybody knows who Penguin is. Yeah. So it's pretty deep. So
that's true, because Electro, I mean, when I remember when that came out, Electro, I'm like, I'd never read a single book with Electro in it. So
yeah,
I don't know. I guess it just depends. But yeah, I think you're right in those two characters having the most well-known Rogues Galleries, except the Flash too. But again, Flash is more like Spider-Man in that he had a deep bench, but not as well known.
Yeah.
Well, I also thought that this character, is still pretty close. Now, the thing that I guess I had forgotten about, because I had read most of these at some point in reprints, not having read the originals, but read reprints at some point, and I had forgotten how his Peter Parker's sense of right and wrong had changed, right? Because early on he's not going to do anything bad, but he'll let something bad happen. He's not going to go out of his way to stop it. We saw that in Amazing Fantasy 15, right? And his first thought on he gets these powers is not to help other people, right? But to help out himself. And that even continues after the death of Uncle Ben into these other issues, where he's trying to, how can I use this to make money? How can I use this to, pay Aunt May's bills? I mean, some of it not, but it's not all 100% altruistic, And a lot of times in modern Marvel, he's kind of considered, I mean, right after Captain America, kind of the heart of the Marvel universe. So that's something that has, and I guess you could say, well, in the 63, so the 60 years that this character has grown from a teenager to an early 20s guy, he's matured dramatically in those 60 years.
And that's the word, the maturity. His moral compass was not set quite in these first issues, and whether it was intentional or not, we wouldn't have the origin story that we did if it wasn't for him letting that robber get away, and then you know that makes for one of the best origin stories in comics history. And honestly, it's probably more true to form in a real humanistic situation. It's like, wow, I could probably make some quick cash if I just use these for bad reasons. So
he's got money problems. I mean, that's something that's always stood out to me about Peter Parker is he's always struggling financially. He is the like a true shot of an American New Yorker. Like he just can't pay his rent. Like that is constant for this dude.
I've got to find this one thing. I thought it was in issue 1. Did you notice the big mistake in issue 1?
Peter Palmer.
Peter Palmer.
I never heard of that before. I thought for sure if I said that, you go, oh yeah, that's been discussed 1,000 times, Mike. But
I caught it immediately, and I looked it up, and I went, we nitpick on so much now that there. And if you go to like the Wikipedia pages for like even just these 5 issues, it's like, here's this mess up, here's this mess up, here's this, and it's just like it's names, it's spelling. Octavius is spelt wrong half the time, and like it's just all of these things, and they go, we really have it bad now.
Yeah, it was issue 2 that it happened not once but twice. That I saw.
The Palmer thing?
I thought it was in
the Palmer
1.
thing happened.
It's issue 1. It's the backstory on second story, and it's the entire issue.
Yeah, the entire issue.
It is the entire issue.
So that just tells you how the editorial was, and of course you had Stanley editing. I guess John Duffy. I mean, it's like if he lettered both of these books, you figured he would have caught that, but
he's brand new. I mean, this is a brand new character, so you can see. I would say this is the first appearance of his Spidey sense too in issue 1.
Actually, 2 different letters: Johnny D in the first half, and John Duffy in the second half. So that probably explains part of it, is we have different letters.
They wouldn't know. Yeah.
And it was probably too costly to take it back to have it redone after it was finished.
Oh yeah.
So they said, just run with it. It's just comic books, nobody cares.
Right.
Comic mags.
That's right.
I think one of the most surprising things for me was, and I mean, I knew that Amazing Fantasy had stopped after issue 15, right? But that it just was this abrupt, like, we found a hit, we're gonna change this over, and what is it? It's like 6 months later or whatever is the switch from Amazing Fantasy to Amazing Spider-Man. And they just are like, we're not getting an issue 16, we're doing this instead, and they drop it after that. And there's like in the little collection I had, at least, but I'm sure it's on everything, there's a little note that's like, just so you know, there's not going to be this thing, there's going to be this whole other book instead. It's like, dang, they must have had a hit and they reacted to it immediately.
So Amazing Spider-Man #1 came out in March 1963, and Amazing Fantasy 15
was August 62 is the cover date.
Okay, it would have been so August. So
6 months.
So however, because that was, I don't know if that was the release date or the cover date for Amazing.
That's cover, yeah.
Yeah. So, but
release was June to December, it looks like.
Yeah. See, it is kind of crazy that there's that gap. We don't think about that gap, but yeah, there's a pretty good sized gap there.
Well, in one of the later letter pages, I think it's in issue Amazing Spider-Man issue 3. Oh no, that's not it. It's either 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And the editors explain that their intentions were to cancel Amazing Fantasy 15, with 15 anyway. Mm-hmm. But Spider-Man was such a big hit, they just basically shut down that series, that title, and created a new one just with Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't read the letter pages.
And from 14 to 15 of Amazing Fantasy, was a 3-month gap between those two. They weren't monthly, I guess, at that point. I don't think about books not being monthly at that point in time.
Actually, that was much more common. Yeah.
If you would have read the backup stories in the Amazing Fantasy 15, you had the bell ringer, the the man in the mummy case and things like that. So
you would have known why it was on its way out.
yes, it was definitely an anthology. It was
Yeah,
like Mystery in Space or something.
Yeah. So after reading that All-Star 8, I skipped the backup stories this time.
Yeah, I didn't read them either. I just looked at the titles.
But it was actually, if I remember correctly, it was actually Amazing Adult Fantasy issues 1 through 15, and then became Amazing Fantasy 15, and then it got canceled. Then of course they released Amazing Fantasy 16 like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that.
95 was.
Oh, so it's been longer than that. Okay, so yeah.
So the Chameleon was the supervillain in issue 1.
Right.
And he had no superpowers. Did that change over time, Scott? I had a note here to ask you that.
You know, I still think it's more of a technological thing than a power thing for Chameleon, but he's not popped up in a while that I remember. But I'm not reading Spider-Man monthly. I did for a while, but I haven't in several years. So, and it's weird because every time I read Spider-Man, I really enjoy Spider-Man. But for some reason, when it's like it's one of the first titles that I choose to put down and not pick up again for a while. If I were to go back and a lot of that was because of the whole Spider-Verse stuff. I got really tired of the Spider-Verse, all the Spider-Man variants. And while I love that in the Into the Spider-Verse series movies, it just wears me down in the comics.
It's too much. So, they need to back off a bit.
Yeah. Okay, next question. So I think we've kind of hit on this a little bit already, but I'll go ahead and throw it out there again. So how closely does this version of the character match up to what we see in comics today? What's the same? What's different? The first thing I'm going to comment on, and is very similar to something we saw in Wonder Woman, was the radio mental powers that magically pop up, because we have the chameleon who sends out the message that only Spider-Man can hear, right? And then he's able to use his spider sense to lock on to the signals from the helicopter to chase the chameleon. So it's like a very broad use of this powers before it finally kind of settles back into what we think of as spider sense as being today. So
I think on the one that I kind of, and it's not a now versus then, it's more of a through time, is the web shooters versus producing the actual webbing internally.
That comes and goes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that's not really a now versus then. It's kind of a throughout time. It just kind of wavers back and forth. But it originally had started out as web shooters, which drives me nuts only because he can do all these other things that are spider related, but he's got to come up with a web shooter on his own.
Totally agree. If you were to ask me which camp I'm in, it's the natural power, not technology.
Well,
I'd rather.
No, because then you had that whole argument about where he should be shooting his webs out of. So he needs the web shooters, right? So you're able to adapt, fingers falling and that, but there's not anything on a person that you can adapt to shooting webs out of your
Oh boy.
Because you've heard that whole argument before, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So no, I'm fine.
I forget about it every time until I get into the argument and somebody pulls that card and I'm like, dang it, you're right.
Yeah.
Webs don't come from the wrist.
That's right. Plus, he couldn't go to the doctor ever if that were the case.
Right.
So not that he could anyway. But of course, at the storytelling at this time, everything is atomic, right? Spider-Man gets his power from an atomic spider. Chameleon stealing atomic plans.
Doc Ock,
Doc Ock is fused with an atomic experiment. Sandman escaping, runs to an atomic test site. It's just everything, and then we get the X-Men.
Yes.
So that was the go-to. If you needed to explain something, I know it's atomic. So
yes, must be. Yeah.
Nobody questioned.
The thing I wasn't aware that he had in those early days was basically a spider signal off his belt. I was a little bit surprised to see that. We haven't seen it in recent times. So that's my biggest difference. And of course it's come and gone, but the webbing between his arms and his torso, I like that design that Ditko had, but you don't really, it's not practical or it's not used very often.
Makes him like a flying squirrel when he jumps off a rooftop.
But it makes, I mean, to me, it made sense. It would help him glide a little bit. He wouldn't have to. He swings up and he glides for a little bit, and then he swings, not the constant swing.
Mm-hmm.
He figured he'd want to conserve his web fluid as often as he runs out of it.
I don't know. Does a web really provide that kind of wind resistance? I thought that with there was one of the issues where he made a parachute out of the webbing. I'm like,
yes,
that's a really tight weave there you made, buddy.
Well, they explain this later on in the official handbook to the Marvel Universe, where he can actually do webbing or like a paste, or he has all these different.
Oh yeah,
I'm
gotcha.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just going on. I'm doing the fat comic book guy, Actually.
What about the Tinkerer? Have we seen him again?
Yes, but I couldn't tell you where.
Okay.
So I don't. I don't know. He's not obviously, one of the key villains, but I'm pretty sure the Tinkerer. Yeah. It was kind of funny how old some of the villains were.
Yeah.
Between the Vulture and the Tinkerer, and
mm-hmm.
and there's this whole thing in the background where it's like, obviously we get early on, J. Jonah Jameson's out to get Spider-Man, right? Because he thinks attention should go to the real heroes like his son, John Jameson, the astronaut. And then, Spider-Man's always running away. Well, they're out to get me. And then you always hear the police or the people in the crowd going, yeah, Spider-Man's trying to do good. But he never hears that part of it, So you have that, woe is me. He even sobs in that one scene, you get that little sob as he's talking, So it's the poor down on his luck Parker, or Palmer, in this case may have been for one issue. So I was looking at my notes as I was reading this. Not the Daily Bugle, right? So the Daily Bugle was like what Spider-Man, the newspaper for Spider-Man, and it's Now magazine instead of the Daily Bugle. So I don't even know when the Daily Bugle first finally shows up by name. I probably should look that up. But it's Jameson Publications, Now magazine. So
I didn't really even pick up on that, but you're right. I wonder if that's where Marvel Now got it.
It could be, because they got to reuse those things to maintain any type of trademark / copyright / whatever they have on those to, to keep those things moving forward. So maybe that's why it is Marvel Now, or was Marvel Now.
The first appearance of the Daily Bugle is in Marvel Mystery Comics number 18 in 1941.
So they just rehashed something. Then.
Looks like they reused it. Yeah. Looks like it was. I don't know. It's a good time. Take me a second. It looks like because there's a lot of history with the Daily Bugle prior to it being
Spider-Man. Well, and even Ben and May Parker, they have a pre-Spider-Man appearance.
Oh, really?
Was it Strange Tales? But there's considered the prototypes for May and Ben Parker. And then also you notice that the phrase "with great power comes great responsibility" is not used anywhere here. So
I noticed that. Yeah.
So that's kind of something else that's you kind of think of, and that's a discussion that's been had a lot. It's something that you think is there from the beginning, but it's not actually present here in these stories.
Yeah, I was surprised just to not see it.
Let's see what other. So, are there any particular moments from the first 5 issues that you would like to call some attention to that we haven't already talked about?
Oh boy,
my moment was the Peter Palmer. That was what I had noticed. Was all the typos and misspellings.
Yeah. That was just so hard to. I mean, it's just like. I had to read it 3 times. It's like, are my eyes crossing? What is going on here? Because, and why they wouldn't fix that for the
That's
digital.
what I thought.
Yeah. Just fix it.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a really, really terrible, RK over that LM.
White out. And
Yeah. It's not that big of a deal. Just fix that. I meant to go find some of my, I think I have a Legends reprint of Amazing Fantasy 15. I need. Or of course it wasn't in 15, it was in 1, so I guess I couldn't have done that. So I meant to try to find a reprint of that and see if it's still there in the reprint or not. So
I get a kick out of it was in issue 1 of Amazing Spider-Man where Peter is trapped in this plexiglass container. Like they made it sound like that was some super scientific substance, but he's in plexiglass. And when he he's trying to get out, Reed Richards says, "Be careful with that equipment. It costs thousands."
Yeah.
And I think the whole team up with the first issue with the Fantastic Four, I think nowadays people would say, wow, they're really jumping the shark with the second appearance of this character. They're sort of teaming him up with other characters right off the bat instead of letting him establish himself. But it just goes to show that even back then, 60 years ago, they probably used the Fantastic Four were probably established. I'm not sure how many issues they were in by then, but they were established enough that they could help promote Spider-Man.
Year before, so 61. So yeah. And then the quote, just to clarify, in Amazing Fantasy 15, it's like that last panel in the Spider-Man story where it says, "And a lean, silent figure slowly fades into the gathering darkness where at last that in the world with great power there must also come great responsibility." It's the fact that it wasn't Ben Parker that says it, right? It's just actually there in the in it. So that's kind of like just to clarify that whole thing about great power and great responsibility. Okay, I think I've made it through my notes on Spider-Man. I didn't have anything else. So you guys got any final thoughts on the Amazing Spider-Man?
I think I'm gonna keep reading this collection that I've got, which is like, I think it's the first maybe 8 or whatever issues, and I don't remember. I think it's the Masterworks or something that I've got.
Usually they're like 16.
Maybe that's what it is. But I was like, I'll keep reading these. And it's good enough to where I've actually hot take. We'll see if this actually goes anywhere. I've been trying to write a Spider-Man song for like 2 years, and that's why I suggested this, because I was like, I need like a reason to actually go back and read like origin story like Spider-Man stuff, because I've got almost everything, but I just need like a verse that I'm working on that I got to figure out. So this was kind of my reasoning for suggesting to do Spider-Man next. So I'll finish it up so I can maybe get some more ideas.
That sounds good. So, all right. Well, we decided we weren't going to do any grading on these because this is more just of a historical thing, right? Yeah. So, all right. So we ready to CLZ shake?
Let's shake it up.
You got your here. I'll got my phone out. I'll try to get the glare off of it and see what I get there. Okay, I think I've talked about this series quite enough. This is It looks like issue number 7. All right, at least it's not ROM or Micronauts or Star Wars, right?
It's true. Yeah.
So this is from Kieran Gillen, and basically the concept of this series is it's a Saturday morning Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and it's a more mature environment. Unfortunately for me, I was so into this series for like the first 3/4 of it, and it just did not really stick the landing, as a lot of Kieran Gillen stuff kind of has a tendency to do. He just tried to make it too big of a story. It was fine when it was just the story of this group of individuals. Yeah. It became where this fantasy world could actually destroy the real world, and I didn't need that. I just wanted the story about these characters. It got too big for it. But I've kept all the issues in my collection. I haven't gotten rid of them yet. So, but I would suggest anybody read the first volume. If it doesn't immediately draw you in, then skip it. But if it had a pretty, I was in on it pretty quick, so I saw it all the way through. So, all right, next.
I'll shake it up. Deadly Class. Issue 25 specifically, which came out in 2016. This is the Rick Remender and Wes Craig book. I really dig it. This has to be one of the last issues that I probably have read. It's over now, but I think it ended in like issue 40. I kept buying it, of course, but it's in the to read pile because that's how that works.
But I read everything immediately.
Everything you got, yeah.
Yes.
Weirdly enough, I read all of my, like, when a new number 1 comes in, I'm like, oh, I got to read that. And then I'll pile up the next 12 issues after it and not read those at all. I don't know what's wrong with me. But yeah, Deadly Class is always good. I kind of wish the TV series stuck around longer than a season because that was also pretty good.
I forgot that had a series.
You said
Yeah.
40 issues is what that
right
was?
around that. I think it's 45-ish. It's in the 40s, I think, is where they ended it.
Okay. All right. I can't.
Final Night.
Without a
Final
K.
Night. Oh, let's see here. And this is issue. Got to put on my cheaters. It's issue 2. Okay, so this came out in the 90s. November of this issue actually came out in 96. So it straddled 1996 and 97. It was maybe 5 or 6 issues of a mini series that it was one of the better ones after Crisis. You know, you had 0 Hour and you had Armageddon 2000 or 2001, whatever it was. You had a couple of losers. But Final Night basically had a premise that the sun was extinguished and what would happen to Earth, you know, in the days after it's extinguished and it's dark and it's going to get colder and, you know, essentially, spoilers, Green Lantern reignites. It's not even Green Lantern, it's Parallax, and as a form of redemption for everything he did as a bad guy, which was a lot, he reignited the sun. And that's also was the unintended scene where Oliver Queen, where his how he came back alive. You know, he died in his own series, and it was in a scene in Final Night where there was Superman turned over and said he thought he found something on his cape. Basically, it was DNA from Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, getting blown up in the plane, and that's what Hal picked off of his cape and basically reanimated Oliver Queen. So anyway, it was a good series amongst a lot of stinkers of that era.
It's been recommended to me before to read that. I haven't read it before, but that one I was like, oh, I know that series. Yeah. Somebody's like, you got to read Final Night. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so Shad, what's up next for the Campus Comics Cast?
We have the pre-order catalogs, as we will word them now, coming up next.
All right, and Mike, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, where would they do that at?
I'd say Mike Atchison 5 on Twitter or at the podcast@bergcomics.com email address.
All right, Shad?
You can find me on Facebook at Shad Schubert, SHAAD-SCHUBERT.
And I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at bergcomics.com, BURG Comics, with links to social media, eBay store. And we'll be back soon with another episode.
Okay, got my notes finally. It's all about preparation, right? That's right. We are nothing but professional here. Right. Yeah, 90% opening it. That's right. 3 minutes till we start getting our stuff together. That's right. And by nothing but, I mean the NO from nothing and the last T from but. Nah. All right. Well, we good to go? Can we jump right in? Ready to wait, or we need to wait longer for somebody to say something stupid and then we can jump in? Let's see what I can say.